Grand Theft Auto 5, known as being one of the most revolutionary titles of gaming, it has sold more than 130 million copies in the 7-year lifespan that it's been around for. It's no secret to anyone that Grand Theft Auto 5 is so popular, considering that the community is still alive and thriving even to this day, with millions of players going online daily. So if you're wondering what this video is about, we're going to take a look at Grand Theft Auto 5 in its entirety and look at what baggage it carries on its golden shoulders. So just before we start, I'm just going to explain that due to the expansiveness of Grand Theft Auto 5, we're splitting up story mode and online mode into two separate videos. Today's focus will be story mode, whereas online mode will be for another day. Alright, so just the way I'm organizing this video, we'll be taking decent peeks at each quality that I'm about to list. So we'll be looking at the characters, the missions, and a bit of the story. I don't want to spend too much time on the story though, because that itself could take a very long time. So briefly on the story, we're going to look at the characters in-depthly and look at the mission variety. So, shall we start with that? Let's do it. Alright, so to take a look at the characters first, as they are the ones that carry the story, would make sense to me. So let's list them off one by one. We got the protagonist, Michael DeSanta, or Michael Townley, whatever way you prefer to refer to him as, Franklin Clinton, and Trevor Phillips, each character offering their own personality traits and subplots alongside them. Now to look at the characters one by one, so we'll start with Michael DeSanta first, as he is my favorite. Michael is about 45 years old and is known to have a pretty explosive personality. It's not very hard to piss him off at all. Now, the reason why this is the case is it partially stems from his subplot, which is his dysfunctional family. He has a wife who cannot tolerate him whatsoever, and vice versa. It is very easy for those two to piss each other off. Not to mention that Michael views his kids as more of a burden at the start of the game. Therefore, he feels like instead of being a good father, he just feels like he's doing nothing but bailing them out of trouble. Now, on to Franklin Clinton. Franklin is 28 years old. His interest lies in just making bank for himself and maybe some of his friends. Franklin's backstory isn't very impactful. His mom passed away and he lives with his aunt Denise, but Denise is quite the crazy character. Crazy to the point where she's not very cultivating. I don't want to know more about her because she's just not interesting. She's way too one-dimensional, which takes points away from Franklin because you're already taking a piss on his backstory, of which doesn't really exist. We know his mom passed away, but that's pretty much it. Yes, he was friends with Lamar since they were younger, and he went to school with Tanya and Tanisha, but aside from that, he doesn't have much to offer, hence why he's actually my least favorite character. Now on to the most iconic character of Grand Theft Auto 5. Trevor Phillips. Trevor is 47 years old, being the oldest of the three, of course. Trevor's backstory can be divided into two paths, with one being more recent than the other. So we'll start with the more well-known one. He has a business that he works for, Trevor Phillips Industry, a drug dealing company. He works with three of his friends, that would be Chef, Wade, and Ron. The chemistry between those four work very well to convey what his business is about, and it works and allows him to be more of a fleshed out character. So I really respect that. His other backstory actually consists of his childhood, which is already a pretty decent start to the character that he is. His dad left his mom and himself, along with his mom being a prostitute and belittling him at any time she could. Even seen in the hallucination mission, including his mom, Trevor was very vulnerable there. You could see him break apart upon seeing her. And to be honest, it was kind of sad when he found out she was an hallucination and nothing more. It goes to show that Trevor isn't as one-dimensional as he comes off as. You could look at his psychotic behavior and say, oh, is that all he has to offer? He's just kind of psychotic. But when you realize what it stems from, it adds a layer to the character. Not to mention his psychotic side is what brings the humor in Grand Theft Auto 5. Therefore, I think Trevor is a really good character, not as good as Michael. I think Michael's depth is a little bit more involved, which I think in turn makes him a little better, but Trevor is no character that you can just kick off to the side. He works amongst the other two. So taking a look at these characters overall, the three main protagonists, you can tell that their chemistry works with each other. Michael's the in-between of Franklin and Trevor. While Trevor can go to 0 to 100, you can see Michael go from 0 to 40 to 60 to 100. You can see that build up in his anger, while Franklin keeps it almost at a consistent 0, no higher than 20 at any point in the story. The chemistry works because there's balance between them. Trevor's the funny one, Michael's the serious one, Franklin's the obedient one. But nobody is a suck-up to the other one. They do what they gotta do. And to me, it goes to show that they're really developed as individuals, but can also work very well together. So, the writing team behind the characters, despite Franklin's shortcomings, I would say, it works very well. And I think they did an excellent job with it. So, good job, Rockstar. That was well done. Now, to look at the bulk of the story of Grand Theft Auto 5, I'm not going to get too nitty-gritty with it because there's quite a lot here, so I'll start with the main stem. At least of when the three protagonists unite, because anything before is more related to subplot or anything along the lines of that. Our three protagonists, Michael, Franklin, and Trevor, catch the eyes of Steve Haynes. Steve Haynes and Dave Norton are FIB agents. The interest of Steve Haynes lies at just trying to further his career. He's been working with the FIB for 20 years at this point in the story as a 38-year-old man as all this happens, and he wants to manipulate our three protagonists for their wrongdoings, because he knows if they disobey, his most logical course of action will be to send them to jail or possibly get them executed. So he's easily able to make them be his guinea pigs. With this, I guess you could say, recipe in mind, it sounds very one-dimensional, and in a way, it is. But it does open the doorway for ideas. And getting in an involvement of other characters through the system kind of works, to be honest. There are a lot of very entertaining missions that are conducted by Steve Haynes and Dave Norton, and it works very well. Not to mention that Dave Norton isn't so good as he seems on the surface. That's not to say Dave Norton's an angel, even in the present storyline, but Dave Norton is responsible for conducting the faking of Michael's death at the beginning or ending of the prologue. So, everybody's done something here. Now on to the 69 missions that the story mode has to offer. 69 isn't a funny number anymore, alright? But, surely with 69 missions, there's gotta be some good ones, some bad ones, some amazing ones. Most of them are good, some of them are exceptional, a couple of them kinda suck. Let me explain which each type of mission kinda sucks and which ones are amazing. The fetch quest missions are absolutely my least favorite. They're very aggravating, and when I talk about fetch quests, I'm specifically referring to stuff like the Gauntlet. The 3 Gauntlet missions, screw them. I hate them a lot. We don't even get straight directions on where to go, so I'm not even going to step on that. Missions like Tow Truck, where they have no bearing on the story. Now, you could make the argument that Tow Truck is a little bit bearing on Franklin because it opens up about his backstory a little bit with, is it Tanya or Tanisha? 1 to 2. But the problem is here is, like, I can't even remember the mission. Therefore, if it's not a memorable mission, then clearly it couldn't have hit very good notes there, and it didn't. It was a boring mission. It didn't change the story in any way. And I'm not saying Rockstar is bad for doing that, because no game is absolutely perfect, but that's kind of a problem. But granted, missions like that, like Tow Truck, stuff that have no bearing on the story, those are more strangers and freaks types of missions. And to be honest, that's where they belong. So in terms of sorting out the missions that don't matter versus the missions that do matter, Rockstar did a pretty good job. Tow Truck's the only one that I kind of hate. Now on to the good missions. I like most of the FIB missions. They're fun. They include the action, the strategy, all of it. I can't say much more. They're pretty simple, but fun to play. My favorite missions typically tend to be the ones that involve Michael's family or just the heist in general. Specifically, the Paleto Score. I love the Paleto Score. The Paleto Score is my favorite mission in the game. It balances action, adrenaline, and exhilaration into just this packed feeling of nothing but joy. you get this like overwhelming sensation of power, and that's what GTA should offer. It should make you feel like you have this protagonist protection. You're this unstoppable force, and the Polito score captured that perfectly. The Polito score will never be beat, ever. I don't care what anybody says. It's my all-time favorite. As for the Michael family missions, I preferably like Meltdown and Reuniting the Family. They're great. I like seeing Michael's family progress and getting along more and more. Meltdown is great because there's a shootout, and actually Meltdown's my second favorite mission of the game. I like the shootout that happens. I like how Michael is being the hero of his family, with Jimmy coming in with a quick save. It has that exhilaration to it. It has that action, and it even has emotion there. To think, Amanda and Tracy would have died if you did not show up. Yes, Amanda's a little bit whiny, and Tracy is Tracy, but ultimately, as Michael, they're your kids. And you gotta do your best to protect them. And if you play Meltdown correctly, protect them is what you will end up doing. It is so amazing. The music's on point. The dialogue's on point. There's a lot of strong points in these exhilarating and extremely amazing missions. And Rockstar did pretty good with most of the missions in this game, with very few just falling short. So all in all, the missions are pretty strong overall. Now, onto the controls, because controls allow you to play the game. And I gotta say, Grand Theft Auto 5 did a pretty good job with the controls. Although a little bit hard to adapt to at first, the game is generous into telling you what you need to do without coming off as being overbearing or annoying. The only problem with the controls, I would say, is how the game reacts when you try doing shootouts on vehicles. There's no auto lock or anything, which on one hand, I can understand. On another, though, it's pretty annoying. So, as a result, the controls aren't perfect, but they're pretty close to being perfect. I feel like the sensitivity's in the right spot, the button mapping's in the right spot, it's just that one little flaw that takes away from it. Also, on top of that, planes kinda suck, but that's all. So, for Grand Theft Auto 5, what are my thoughts? Does it get the love it deserves? Does it deserve more love? Maybe it's overrated? What is it? Grand Theft Auto 5, I think, sits right with everybody's emotions. It's a phenomenal game. I love the story mode. It's fun to do. The missions are mostly exhilarating. I love the characters who I play as, even Franklin, despite him being my least favorite. Just to give you an idea of how much I like Franklin, Michael's like a 9.5 out of 10, Trevor's like a 9.25 out of 10, Franklin's a 9. 9 is lower than both 9.25 and 9.5, therefore he is my least favorite, but he's not bad. The game made sure you fell in love with these characters because you were presented with 3 options at the end. We all picked C. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody had the heart to seriously pick A or B. The only reason why I picked A or B at any point was just so I can get the gold medal for those endings. But canonically, in this game, C happens. And you know what? That's the way it's meant to be. I don't care what anybody says. The writers did a fantastic job with making the characters. And at the end of the day, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a wonderful game. It's revolutionary, it looks beautiful. What else can I say about it? Though it's not a perfect game, it deserves to be considered one of the best out there. In fact, I will give it a rating out of 10. Taking a look at everything Grand Theft Auto 5 has to offer, my final rating for Grand Theft Auto 5 is a 9.3 out of 10.
You always like gasoline, Trevor!